Tough question. And I searched for the right word, seemed to describe it. And that one word is challenging. For that, I got to give you a reason though, because AAIE at that time was trying to implement a very ambitious strategic plan, and it really didn't have the funding necessary to do all the wonderful things it was wanting to do. And we had at that time, I think it was a 21-member board, and to try to for me to try to bring leadership to that board and get the desired result, all of it was very challenging. So there's your word. A number of new initiatives that AAIE has put out there. The Summer Leadership Institutes is a new initiative that's happened in recent years. That didn't exist when I was president of AAIE. I think the Leadership Institute program that's being done in cooperation with Wilkes University is something that's been out there for 4 or 5 years, and 6 years, I think. And I think that's an important contribution. I'm involved in the Leadership Legacy Mentoring Program, which was announced at this last Atlanta conference. And, to me, that's another new initiative. So I think all these things are positives, and, I put them there on the positive side of the sheet. There's been major improvement over the years on the website, the AAIE website. That's positive, for sure. I think the one downside that hasn't really happened is I think AAIE has struggled to try to find its mission. And it's got a wonderful title, Association for the Advancement of International Education. I mean, that just opens up the whole world. I mean, you've got the whole world out there, but for whatever reason, it's always been kind of conference focused. I was very pleased with what I saw in Atlanta, and I think there's a real major turn of events, and I think AAIE is in fact going to find that mission, and it's going to be there, and I think all of us are going to benefit from it. The first conference I went to was in Atlantic City, and it was in 1972. I raced up the boardwalk because I was doing some work for another organization at the time, and I wanted to find out who were the shakers and movers at AAIE, partly because I wanted a job overseas. The time was limited, and I was racing around trying to network, trying to find the right person to give my resume to. I was overwhelmed by the number of vendors who were there. I was obviously on strange turf, but I was overwhelmed by it. I've been to many, many, many conferences since, and I have to admit that none of them were more frantic than that first one in 1972. I was lucky, really lucky. Lupke was working, he was a regional education officer for the State Department. And for whatever reason, Paul saw in me potential, I guess, because he did receive my resume. And it was a short time afterwards, that I got the call from Manila. And that's how I got my first job overseas. I mean, you're suggesting I couldn't hold a job, huh? It's called an interim assignment. Here long enough to get a new superintendent hired and to kind of point the board in the right direction, and then I was going to move on. Well, while I was doing that, my good friend Rick Spradling was in Vienna, and he said, "Daryle, how would you like to be a interim principal, high school principal?" And I had done this, I'd done that work for a number of years, and I love that job more than practically any other job in schools. And so I went to Vienna for a year. Vienna, why not? Beautiful place, and I did an interim assignment there. Well, anyway, all of this kind of stumbled forward. I no longer hold that title anymore. Is the interim? There's an interim queen out there, Ellen Stern, and and she's the one who is done more interims than anybody else. But anyway, each of these other jobs were 1 year, and I was called in for different circumstances. One situation was where the headmaster had passed away during the summer. Another situation was a headmaster who hadn't signed his contract, and his contract was no longer available. And another was a financial situation. So, I mean, each of the other interim appointments were different types of jobs. So it was my experience that I could bring into it, plus the fact that I had a wonderful spouse who was willing to pack everything. It's had its own satisfaction, you know, and challenges too. But I mean, being a year in Vienna, being a year in Paris, I mean, being a year in Mumbai, I mean, these are fantastic opportunities. Good question. I think one lesson that is out there always out there, and that it's a people business, and you can't ever forget that. You know, it's people who quote offer the challenges, if you like. It's also people who have the solutions, you know, to get things done. And so I think that what you have to do for sure is be a good listener. Have to also be a proactive person. Now, in the interim assignments, you go to a school, and they have their agenda that they want you to fulfill. You have your agenda that you want to fulfill, and then you probably have what needs to be done, you know, that has to be taken care of. So you kind of work through all of that. But anyway, I know that working with school boards is sometimes easy, sometimes hard. You know, it just depends on what the chemistry is. But you have to get there quick as an interim. And actually, you have to get there quick even as a permanent. And so I think all the jobs offer different reasons why you've got to kind of dip into, you know, what that experience has been for you so that you can, in fact, get the job done. But it's bottom line, it's a people business. And you better, and you need to stay alert. Five goals that I've always carried with me. Well, actually, I learned these goals when I was superintendent in Riyadh, when I had a very, very strong board chair named Bob Eichfeld, who was with Citibank. And Bob was asked the question, what do parents expect from the superintendent? And so he came up with the five things, you know, that are expected. One is that you attract the best talent, you develop that talent, you mentor that talent, and you retain that talent. You know, two, you certainly work with trying to develop a superior curriculum, but even more important, you've got to protect that curriculum. You certainly have to make sure the school has sound financial goals, and that you're paying attention. And I think one of the lessons I've learned as a superintendent is never turn it over to someone else, even though you might have a business manager, you might have bookkeepers, and you might have accountants. I think it's extremely important that you understand what's going on, you know. And so that's certainly important. Communication at all levels and throughout your community, you know, is certainly a goal that has to be attended to. And finally, you just got to know your environment. You've got to anticipate, and you know, for me, you have to plan strategically. And so, you know, I use those five goals in just about any assignment or appointment, you know, that I go into. It's true. You know, our kids grew up overseas in international schools, and they stayed in the United States long enough to get their college degree. They were gone, and they both got jobs within days after getting their diploma. Happened to walk into a circumstance in Saudi Arabia where, you know, because of the Gulf War, teachers were going in one direction out, and there was openings, and so that's how they had their first teaching. That's where they got their first teaching jobs. And of course, they've since married and have had a number of other jobs. And My son is now back in Saudi Arabia. He works for Aramco, the Aramco schools. And our daughter for 14 years was in Dubai. I'm proud of him. I'd like to say we modeled, my wife and I, we modeled the good values, that are inherent with good education, and that they saw in that modeling something that they wanted. I don't ever remember sitting around the dinner table saying, asking the question, what do you want to be? You know, and then putting a judgment, if my son said, I want to be a truck driver, how do you react to that as a parent? So I don't remember ever having those kind of conversations. It just had a natural flow. There's opportunity there for it to really make a difference. I think when you have international schools with over 70 different national and cultural groups, represented, I think you have the opportunity to model working together, to model good democratic values. I would hope all of that would make a difference. And I hear often leaders in many of our countries who, in fact, mentioned that they had attended an international school, and I think that's a great positive, and I would hope that would continue. One trend which is out there, which I think is very healthy, is that international schools more and more are taking on local national students. And that didn't happen in the past. It used to be rules. I'll use Saudi Arabia as an example. In Saudi Arabia, when my 10 years there, 11 years there, local Saudis couldn't attend the international school. Now that's changed. I think it's that way all over the world, and I think that's good too. Make the best of it. Parlay it into something great and wonderful. Don't take it for granted, because believe me, you're really lucky. And where students see that most often is when they go to college. Been privileged. I don't mean that in a monetary way, but they've benefited from a good education. I don't know if you know much about international baccalaureate curriculum, but I'll just use that as one example. It's very rigorous. It's a very high standard, and it's very demanding. And when you're in an environment where the culture of that environment is that you succeed in a curriculum like International Baccalaureate, boy, I'm telling you, you're ahead of the pack when you get to university and out in the world. So, don't take it for granted. Make the best of it, and take it somewhere with you. AAIE provides a service. It's a valued service that we would all want to seek. It can be the workshops that are already part of the agenda. It could be the conference. It could be networking. At the HeadNet component of AAIE. That was a fabulous initiative. I should have included it in my, what's happened to AAIE since I left, because it did happen since I left, where heads of school have an opportunity to send a message out to the whole world, and in 24 hours they get 24 responses. So, I think it's opportunity for vendors, by the way, to be connected to the overseas schools. And I think all of us, who work overseas, when you come to the conference, you're doing an awful lot of business. And so when vendors are all there, and when colleagues are all there, and there's the opportunity to network and meet with the State Department people and all of that is valued service. So I really, it will continue, and I think, we're today with technology and all that, it's very easy to get good input. I noticed that one of the things that is happening already is that Yolanda is sending out surveys. She wanted to evaluate the conference as an example. I think having an organization, central, doing that kind of work is pretty important. There was an organization out there that I watched very closely, and I saw it grow from being an organization of curriculum directors to being a worldwide organization that included school heads and college professors and all people interested in curriculum and instruction. And that was ASCD. And I've often thought that a good model for AAIE is to really go after that kind of an outreach. Now, I come back again. It's an association for the advancement of international education. Therefore, it should include teachers. It should include all the people that are involved in international education, college professors. There was a time in the past when there was an awful lot of stateside school superintendents that were part of AAIE. They were also part of a program called School-to-School Partnership Program. And I noticed that there was a session in Atlanta where kind of a probe to see if kind of resurrecting that program, might have some value, and I sat in on that meeting, and I'm not sure what the final conclusion was. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I really think that we should, we need to get, AAIE needs to get much broader. Now, that brings me to another point. It also needs subscription. You can't have all these wonderful ideas and not have revenue to be able to support them. And the only way you're going to get that revenue is through membership. So, to me, that's a major need, for AAIE to do, is to somehow get away from that tight little. There was fear in Atlanta from a number of people who had been around AAIE, and it felt like perhaps history had been lost. I tell you what they did, what Yolanda and others had done. They put together a fantastic display of the history of AAIE. And some of us that are a bit older were standing there at that display, and we're saying, "Oh, there's Bill, and there's there's Ralph, and and there's Fred, and it was a great thing. I commend Yolanda and her planning team for pulling all that together." So, bye now.